Hi there, I'm Vincent Boss and I provide dating and self-improvement advice. And in today's podcast, we're going to be discussing ex-back fails, neediness versus neglect. I provide audio coaching for breakup recovery, trying to get an ex back, attracting someone new, and life coaching. Visit www.dateme.tips for more details. Please check your spam and junk folders if you are expecting an email from me. So now let's get back into today's podcast, and today we are discussing ex-back fails, neediness versus neglect. So if you have been dumped and want to try to get your ex back, you need to avoid behaving in ways which are likely to fail. In today's podcast, I'll be giving you 3 points to consider regarding neediness versus neglect. So let's get straight into this, and point number 1 is these behaviours get you dumped. So I think it's important to go back to the beginning of the story of when you were in a relationship with your partner, and unfortunately, they lost romantic emotional attraction for you, and when it hit the necessary low point, this is when you were dumped. Now, it may have not been due to neediness or neglect, but it could have been, because neediness and neglect are 2 of the biggest reasons why somebody can lose romantic emotional attraction. They're 2 of the biggest reasons why people can ultimately get dumped. So before we consider the points regarding trying to get your ex back, we need to look at the fact that it can end a relationship, and it quite possibly was the reason why your relationship did end. So if you can recognise that you were actually dumped due to neediness or neglect, then you can see the importance, I'm sure, of making sure that you develop a stable mindset moving forward. Because if you were to get your ex back, you need to make sure that you are not falling into patterns which actually got you dumped initially. Sadly, so many people get their ex back but haven't learnt their lesson. They haven't evolved as a person. They haven't grown enough to get to the stage of where, when they're in a long-term relationship again, that they don't slip back into bad behaviours. Yes, you may have grown in different ways. Maybe you improve your health and fitness, maybe you're more skilled, but if you haven't looked at the reason why you were dumped, if you haven't looked at some of the situations which cause romantic emotional attraction to be lost, then you're likely to slip back into these behaviours a bit further down the line. Now, not necessarily straight away. Maybe you get your ex back and everything's fine for 2 or 3 months, and then without you really realising, you start behaving in a needy or neglectful way. This is why you really need to be keeping an eye on what things you believe made romantic emotional attraction drop in your ex's mind, because you need to be figuring this out moving forward in a way where if you do reconnect, these elements are not going to be a problem again. There's nothing more heartbreaking than getting your ex back and getting dumped again a little while down the line. So I always say you need to prepare for success. Preparing for success in this regard means you're preparing for getting your ex back. If you get your ex back, you need to make sure that you're not going to slip into these behaviours. And today, of course, we're focusing on neediness and neglect, but it could have been other things as well. Now, even if you don't get your ex back, or maybe you initially want to, but then you find somebody even better, it's just as important not to behave in a way which could get you dumped in the future. So whether or not neediness or neglect played a role in your actual breakup, it could play a role in the future if you're not keeping an eye on things, especially now since you've been dumped. You're going through trauma, you're going through grief. Somebody who had a fairly stable attachment style might now start behaving in a needy way. Or potentially, they're so concerned they could get dumped again in the future, they might be somebody who's becoming more and more cold, more and more avoidant, and maybe neglecting their partner's needs. So it's vital that we remember and we keep in our mindset that neediness and neglect can get you dumped. And whether or not it got you dumped in this instance, it could get you dumped in the future. So please prepare for success. Imagine in your mind that you're going to get your ex back, and think of it in regard of what would you do if and when that happens. How can you make sure this relationship is built on stronger foundations and doesn't slip into problems which may have been similar and or potentially different down the line? make sure neediness and neglect are something that you deal with now, so you're not having to deal with the consequences later. So now let's get into point number 2 and the second point of today's podcast about X-back fails, neediness versus neglect. And point number 2 is neediness when trying to get your ex back. So now we're focusing on the fact of you have been dumped, you want to try to get your ex back, and the fact that neediness can really create an ex back fail. Now, what is neediness when trying to get your ex back? Well, it's probably best shown if you can't maintain my version of the no contact rule. Now, if you're not familiar about no contact, this is something that lots of people suggest you implement if you've been dumped to try and get your ex back. However, there are many different versions of the no contact rule that you can find online, and I believe that my version will give you the best possible chance of success. So I suggest that you subscribe to my YouTube channel and ring the bell for notifications so you can check out all of the content I have on this subject. Please check out my playlist entitled The No Contact Rule so you can fully immerse yourself in my version of a rule. So please give me a subscribe. Only 20% of my viewership are actually subscribed, so that would be really helpful if you could do that and you would be notified of all of my uploads. But if you implement my version of a no contact rule and you can't maintain it, then this is somewhat of a sign that you're going to be behaving in a needy way, because the opposite of no contact, of course, is contact. And the basis to my version of a no contact rule is in most instances, you should never contact your ex again unless they contact you first. Now, there might be a few exceptions to this rule, although this is very rare indeed. But if you want to understand whether you might be one of these exceptions, then you might want to consider my audio coaching service, where me and you can speak one-on-one about your unique specific situation. Go to my website, www.dateme.tips, for more information about how I can become your coach and your teammate via my audio coaching service. But how else can neediness be shown when trying to get an ex back? Well, it's not always about being unable to maintain no contact. Sometimes you might receive contact from your ex, which is obviously a good sign, but then you can't hold your frame. You can't maintain your behavior from this stage. Yes, you've received contact from your ex, but you still need to be behaving in a way which isn't needy. And if, for instance, you get a "Hi, how are you?" from your ex, and you reply with a message which is 10 paragraphs long, or perhaps you respond and then you respond and then you respond again, you're sending 2, 3, 4 messages without reply, you're double texting, as it's known, then this is you behaving in a needy way straight after getting that contact. Just because you've moved into the communication stage, it doesn't mean that you don't have to watch your neediness. No contact isn't just about maintaining it until they reach out to you. You've then got to understand that it is a back and forth approach. Imagine it's a game of tennis. Your ex hits the ball over the net to you. That's their message to you. Now you hit the ball back over the net to them. This is how it has to go back and forth. Now, once you've texted them back, once you've hit that ball back over the net, you can't hit it again unless they hit it back to you. So you need to make sure you have this back and forth approach. You need to make sure that you're not behaving in a needy way during the communication stage. Because some people believe that once we're in the communication stage, everything's fine. I've basically got my ex back. I can behave in any way I want. Well, firstly, you haven't got your ex back yet. Congratulations to getting to this stage, but the job isn't done. But even if you feel that you're on the right lines to getting them back, as I said in point number 1, neediness can get you dumped. So even if you got your ex back, you can't be behaving in this way. Remember the tennis approach, back and forth. That is a safe way to realise whether you're behaving in a needy way or whether you're behaving in a way which is respectable, responsible, and ultimately more attractive. So now let's get into point number 3 and my final point of today's podcast about ex-back fails, neediness versus neglect. And point number 3 is neglect when trying to get your ex back. So if we're considering what the opposite of neediness might be, some people might say, well, it's being unneedy, that's a good thing. Well, you can look at it that way, but you could also look at the other side of a spectrum and you could see neglect. So although it's important not to be needy, it's also important not to be neglectful. So what could this mean when trying to get your ex back? Well, initially, if you're behaving in a way which could be deemed neglectful, that might actually help you maintain my version of a no contact rule. If you're behaving in a way where you're not reaching out to your ex unless absolutely necessary, or unless it is one of those caveats to the rule that I said sometimes very occasionally will be somebody's position. But by and large, if you've been dumped, you should never contact your ex again unless they contact you first. So if you're behaving in a way where you're not doing that, you're not reaching out to them first, that's a good thing. The problem arises is if and when your ex does contact you, when you receive contact from your dumper, if you don't behave in an appropriate way from the stage. Now, in point number 2, we were speaking about neediness and how if your ex reaches out to you, it's important to maintain your frame. Don't start double texting, triple texting. But on the same hand, if you're behaving in a neglectful way, this isn't going to help your cause. Sometimes people believe in a time frame within no contact, where if their ex reaches out to them, then they shouldn't respond within this time frame. Probably the most famous example is the 30-day no contact rule. In the 30-day no contact rule, people suggest that if your ex reaches out to you within 30 days, you don't respond. But when it gets to 30 days, you send a message. Now, I don't believe in this version of the no contact rule. This version is not for me. This version is nothing you would ever hear me promote. And for the example that I've just given, as you can see, if your ex-dumper reached out to you on the 20th day and you're behaving in a way where you're listening to the 30-day no contact rule, you probably wouldn't reply. But you'd be thinking, well, it's not 30 days yet. In my opinion, this is not going to help you. This is neglectful. If you receive contact from your ex-dumper and you want to get back together, you must respond. I don't care whether it's 10 lines of text or just a few words. I believe you can grow breadcrumbs. I believe you can grow the largest tree from the smallest acorn. So if you receive contact from your ex, I don't care whether it's after 1 day, 1 month, or 1 year. If you want to try to get your ex back, you need to reply. And being neglectful by refusing to do this for a certain amount of time is not going to help you. Maybe you're thinking, okay, I've received contact from my ex, it's 9 months down the line, but I'm not going to reply because they've just put, hi, how are you? And in your opinion, you're thinking, well, I'm not going to reply because I think they should be typing a lot more to me. I deserve more. Well, listen, in my opinion, I think you should be responding. Most dumpers are not going to be putting a long message to you telling you how much they miss you. Most dumpers are going to be using the indirect direct approach, where they're actually contacting you because they want to and they miss you, but they're going to be dressing it up as something else. And it's for you to decipher if this is necessary or not. Is this important or not? Whether or not it's a long message, a short message, I don't care what the position is, you should respond. If it's for an unnecessary reason, then that's a really good sign. But if it's for a necessary reason, still respond, but it's showing you as a responsible, respectable person. It will help grow the romantic emotional attraction in your ex's mind if you show yourself as not bitter, not angry, and not twisted. You need to be behaving in a way where you are somebody they want to spend time with. So being neglectful during the communication stage can end a potential reconnection before it even begins. You need to be so careful with this. You need to recognise what you need to do, how and when. Now, there is no guaranteed way of getting your ex back, but certain behaviours certainly increase your chance of success. That is from my research I've done over many years. And that's why my audio coaching service could be for you, because you might have some questions that you really need clarification on for your unique specific situation. Now, neglect isn't just about failing and trying to get your ex back, but also, like neediness, being somebody who is neglecting their partner, if you get them back, is going to get you dumped. I said this in point number 1, and it's absolutely true. You can't be behaving in a cold way during a relationship. You need to make your partner feel loved. You need to spend time together. You need to have good communication skills. You need to make sure that they feel special. Now, you don't have to be needy and over the top, but you need to make sure you're not too cold or avoidant. Your ex and or your partner needs to feel your love. And if you behave in a neglectful way, you will get dumped again. So even if you get your ex back, don't think, okay, that's done, now I can just behave in a cold way, or I ignore my partner and just do my own thing all the time. No, you need to spend time with your partner. You need good communication skills. They need to feel loved. If you believe that this podcast has helped you, then please consider buying me a coffee. The link to do so is in the description.